on the final day of training camp, Robert Saleh answered a question about Jimmy Garoppolo. And I would never think to ask Saleh a question about offense, but he answered it. The question was, how has Jimmy Garoppolo improved in training camp? And Saleh went into deep detail. He says he's making quicker decisions. In the past, sometimes he would be indecisive, hold the ball in the pocket. Now he's not doing that. And it was very complimentary. The next day, someone asked Kyle Shanahan the same question. And Shanahan basically said, well, let's hold our horses. I would expect a quarterback's decision-making to improve as he faces the same defense and the same players every single day in camp for years. Let's see how he does in a real game. And I think it was interesting to see just two different coaches who are on the same page answer the same question with a different tone, a different content, all of it. So I don't know. I mean, did you have any thoughts on that?
I do. First of all, we're not really talking about Garoppolo.
No, we're not talking about Garoppolo.
It's a litmus. Garoppolo was a litmus to how the two different coaches operate.
It's like a Rorschach test.
It's a Rorschach or a litmus or whatever. But we're really talking about the coaches, not the player.
Correct.
Can we agree on that?
No question.
I have another question. I'm like this. I have another question before I answer. How valid is what Saleh says about Garoppolo? Because I assume on every play in training camp, he's looking at his unit. So do you think he's really an astute observer of Jimmy?
Yes, I do think he's an astute observer. Maybe not during practice he's looking at him, but I'm sure he looks at the film of practice. And I think what Saleh was doing is, remember, Saleh is auditioning for a head coaching job. I mean, he should be a head coach right now for the Browns. And I think maybe the reason he's not is because it's harder for defensive coaches to become head coaches. We've seen that. I mean, it took Vic Fangio until he was in his mid-60s. So what I think he wants to show is he knows offense. Ask me a question about the quarterback. I'll give you an in-depth, smart answer. And it's not just the fans who are listening. It's prospective hiring teams who are listening, and they say, oh, actually, he knows about quarterbacks. And that's important. The most important thing a head coach has to know about quarterbacks. Do you know anything, or are you at the mercy of your offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, that kind of thing? I think that's the underlying message of what Saleh was saying.
I love it. So what I think you're saying, Iggy, is that all season long with Saleh, who you have affection for and really admire, there's a subtext to everything he says. And the subtext is, I'm a hell of a coordinator and we want to win over here, but I'm also auditioning. And so you need to be looking at me in two ways. Defensive coordinator for the Niners, prospective head coach. And so he is a shrewd man. And what he's doing is he's showing in every way, I can coach a whole team, both units. And so what he says about Garoppolo is an example of that subtext.
Right. He's being a head coach without being a head coach. He's acting like a head coach, talking like a head coach.
He also is a very enthusiastic, positive man.
Yes, and that's what he's showing. That's his leadership style. Because what he said, I think was interesting, one more thing about it, he didn't give over-the-top praise for Jimmy Garoppolo. He didn't say he has become a great decision maker. He said that about Kirk Cousins before they played him in the playoffs. He said Kirk Cousins is a great decision maker and worth every penny the Vikings give him. What he said is Garoppolo's becoming a quicker decision maker. So that's kind of like a way of looking at the glass half full. Like, he's making progress. Let's focus on the good. And that's very interesting. That's his personality all the way.
And also when he says he's a quicker decision maker, doesn't mean he's a quick decision maker.
Doesn't mean he's a good decision maker. Quicker. That's right. He could be still a slow decision maker, still a bad decision maker, but getting quicker. And that's just how he is. He focuses on the positives like a good teacher does. I mean, you wouldn't crush your creative writing students at USF. You would focus on the positives first and be very gentle with the negatives, wouldn't you?
Well, we always started a discussion of someone's creative writing by what do you like about it?
Yes.
Always was the first topic, so that it would force the other students to be generous and to look for positive things. And the person whose work was being critiqued wouldn't be crushed and could hear criticism later because he or she felt buoyed up.
Okay. Right. They were more receptive. That's Saleh's teaching technique. And what's interesting is that Shanahan doesn't have that teaching style. Saleh's a classic teacher. Shanahan's a classic football coach. He tells it like it is. And when asked with the same question the next day, even knowing what Saleh said, he couldn't help but pretty much contradict Saleh and said, well, no, he didn't say no offense, but we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We need to see him against another team in a real game. Let's not praise him yet. And I think that's interesting because usually coaches aren't stingy with their praise of the franchise quarterback. You just give it to him and who cares? But Shanahan cares. He can't bear to say something that he doesn't intellectually believe, that he thinks is intellectually dishonest. And I like that about him.
I have a few things to say about that. He's not auditioning to be a head coach. He's a head coach, so he doesn't have to show the same level of diplomacy.
Love it.
He and Saleh are in different positions.
Love it.
The other is, I come back to Bill Walsh all the time because he's the template for me on what a great coach is, and I learned from him. So, okay, for Bill, he had two of the greatest quarterbacks who ever lived, maybe the greatest, in Joe, and then Steve is close. He almost never praised them. Now, Joe never talked to me about it, but Steve certainly did. That Bill didn't praise. And I believe Bill didn't praise because he had a platonic ideal of what the best quarterback would be. And no quarterback on earth could be that.
I think Shanahan's the same exact way. That's
what I'm saying. I think he's like Bill. He has a very good quarterback. Now, he doesn't have Steve or Joe, but he has a very good quarterback. But here's Jimmy Garoppolo, and here's his ideal. And he can see the distance, and some of it he's never going to make up. Joe never made up some of the distance, and he can't bring himself to swallow hard and give a grin and say that. So I think he's being very honest, but I think he's kind of hard. Now, again, Bill was hard too. He didn't praise. There were things where I did stuff, and one time when I was with his Stanford team, they asked me to do a little speech that was recorded about having gone to Stanford and what it means and all that. And we watched it in the coach's room, the tape. And Iggy, I thought I did a pretty good job. Plus, I was at Stanford for 6 years. I knew a lot about Stanford. When it was over, Bill just went, okay, next thing. He never said, thanks, Lowell, nothing. And I remembered how my dad would have said, Lowly, that was so good. Bill just said, next thing. And I remembered what Steve had told me. Steve said after he got something right, he would hope for Bill to say, nice going, Steve. And Bill would say, okay, next activity. Never praised. Funny. And I saw it. Funny. And I think Shanahan is that way. He can't bring himself to say what he feels is a falsehood.
And from what I've heard, I don't cover him, but I hear Bill Belichick's the same way. Would be really tough on Tom Brady, and Tom Brady would take it, and that set the tone for the culture in that organization. The greatest player of all time, arguably, allows Bill Belichick to continue to talk to him like a 6th-round pick who's proving himself, and that sets the tone for everything. If Tom Brady takes it, everyone has to take it.
Love it. Love it.
Anyway, that's a tangent.
I want to be real clear on this, viewers. We are in no way criticizing Shanahan. We're simply contrasting styles.
Also, Jimmy Garoppolo came from that New England organization, saw Tom Brady take it from Josh McDaniel and Bill Belichick. And from everything we've seen, he takes it from Kyle Shanahan. Shanahan's a little acerbic in interviews. He's very stingy with praise. Imagine what he's like in meetings. Imagine the day after Jimmy Garoppolo throws a pick or two, what he's like. You never see any resentment on Jimmy Garoppolo's face when he talks about Kyle Shanahan or hear any tone. It's just, okay, I like playing here. It's working out. And I respect that. He seems to have very thick skin. At least that's what he portrays.
Iggy, he had thick skin when he found out they were talking to Brady.
It's like, you guys want to make a bad choice? Go for it. I'll land on my feet. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
So we started talking about the coaches, and we ended up praising the quarterback.
He needs a little praise. James
but it's important because one thing I think about Garoppolo, he has a quarterback's mentality.
Yes.
He's not going to get involved in the petty stuff. He's above it, like Joe was.
Yep. And so let me compare him real quick to Kirk Cousins. We've made this comparison a million times, and we know Shanahan loves Kirk Cousins. Jimmy Garoppolo is a better football player than Kirk Cousins. We've seen Cousins play. Jimmy has a better feel. But what Shanahan wants is for Jimmy to have the mind that Cousins has, the ability to go through and make perfect decisions every play, because Cousins basically speaks Shanahan's language and is a coach on the field. And that's the standard. That's what Shanahan wants. And until Jimmy gets there, Shanahan's always going to be feeling like, is he really worth $27 million a year? How much is it me? How much is it him? How much can I trust him with the season on the line? Those things.